And so part of moving right along, our next segment is going to be called Primes, Accelerating Technology and Innovation. And we have Lee Silvestre, who will be joining us in conversation with Alf Carroll from Raytheon, Eugene Morin from Lockheed, who just had a question, Glen Franks from BAE, and Amy Heintz from Battelle. Is everyone here?
Yes, everyone's in. Yep.
Great.
So let me provide a little context. So again, Lee Silvestre, I assumed a role in, I guess it was toward the end of December, working with the wonderful group that started off the first panel, Steve and Whitney and Christian and Mary Johnson, Christine from the state, as the Northeast Tech Bridge Coordinator. I'm funded out of ONR. I work closely hand in hand with the state, the Navy, the trade organizations, and it's a wonderful opportunity to do something important for our state. This topic came about, and let me define primes. So we call prime contractors primes oftentimes, and for those of you not from the defense industry, these are our large system integrators, our big players in the region. They're not just large though. A prime contractor, these companies that are represented on this panel are the companies with many, many areas of expertise, considerable breadth of talent, a lot of experience, a lot of technology. They basically make magic happen in the world of programs or the world of systems. They take all the pieces of the problems, all the puzzle pieces, and they put it together in a solution set, whether it's a ship, whether it's a weapon system, whether it's a vehicle, undersea vehicle possibly. They put it together so it performs in a way to solve a mission. Over time, prime contractors, large system integrators stay relevant by staying abreast of innovation. They stay current by staying on top of state-of-the-art technology and solutions, not necessarily generating all of it, but staying on top of what's relevant in the industry and in our world today. And while they are the big guys, size-wise, they're also kind of like the Papa Bears of contracting. They play a very important role in teaming and partnering with small businesses, innovators, entrepreneurs, and they take on a lot of responsibility oftentimes to make good things happen with somebody's good idea, good technology, because oftentimes a small company will have a piece of a larger solution. And that piece can only work in the grand scheme of things, in the mission, if it can fit into a larger solution. So they play a very important role in our ecosystem. Northeast Tech Bridge, 401 Tech Bridge, early on formed two coalitions. One was around an academic group, but the first was around the primes, the large system integrators. And we looked across our area and we looked at who the influence players are, who had a presence, who had a stake in particularly DoD and Navy work, who were the movers and shakers in the Northeast region. And we identified initially 6 companies, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BAE, and Battelle. Those are the 4 that are with us today, as well as Huntington Ingalls and General Dynamics Electric Boat. We had to keep it manageable, so we picked 4 of them. But these are the players that we are partnering with as part of what we're calling 401 Prime, or the Prime Coalition with the Tech Bridge. So without further ado, I'd like to cycle through the panelists, Alf, Eugene, Glen, and Dr. Amy Heintz from Battelle, to tell a little bit about who you are, what you do, but most importantly, we've asked them to share stories of how they work within their ecosystem to partner with small companies and partner with businesses to bring in and bring out innovation. So Alf, do you want to kick it off? And by the way, this morning, Alf had a wonderful salt and pepper beard that is not on his face anymore. So don't think I didn't notice, but Alf, why don't you kick it off?
Yes, thank you, Lee. How's my audio, everybody? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot, Lee. Yeah, so I'm Alf Carroll. I work at Raytheon Technologies. When we're not in the pandemic, my office is in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, just up the road from our colleagues at Newark. And I really enjoyed the 3 Newark presenters, by the way. I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know. So I'm going to follow up with all 3 of you. Thank you. So I guess to start the beginning, it was actually with two partners at Newark that I got to work on the very first SBIR ever. And it was at a small business when I worked at a small business right here in my hometown, now Marion, Mass, with a company called Sipican, which is now part of Lockheed. Make a long story short, Jack Griffin, who coordinated all the SBIR work and is now retired, helped us respond to a fleet need that the fleet told us they'd like to do, but it didn't exist. And so we used 1/3 SBIR funds for the propulsion of the small underwater vehicle, some of our own money to figure out how to launch it from a submarine, and we also partnered with many, many other folks, and it became a product. So I learned some stuff early on back in the 90s about what you can do with Navy SBIR when you partner with folks. And it's all about partnering and communicating. So, what I thought I'd do today is just describe only 3 stories of how we've had successful collaboration with SBIR. And these are kind of stories that talk about some of the best practices, just as examples of how maybe in the future, we might be able to work more as a tech bridge partner and help SBIR succeed through collaboration. And when Lee used to be one of my mentors back at Raytheon, she's one of the people that told me how I can tell stories better. So Lee mentored me in how to tell stories. So I'm going to try to do it here. And the 3 different stories involve program gaps that our major programs had at the time, which we might have discovered as primes, but we figured out that we could work the solution for these gaps with small teams of technical leaders on the Navy team, and we partnered and leveraged SBIR to solve those gaps and problems in the program. All right. Okay. So one of these gaps we discovered is on the Zumwalt destroyer program, and at the time I led a number of IPTs on the program. And we discovered a gap in the program that had basically fallen through the cracks in the program office. A big program like the Zumwalt destroyer program, as you can imagine, has many primes involved. And our prime role was to be the combat system integrator for the whole program. And between the shipyard prime, the missile launcher prime, and the Raytheon prime, there was a requirement that just fell through the cracks, and the program discovered it later on, and actually it was after CDR. And then what we did is we brought forward an SBIR solution with a company that we had discovered in Woburn, Massachusetts, that built composites. The name of the company was Kazakh Composites. And what we did with the SBIR program was we took an SBIR that they currently had at Kazakh Composites that was funded by ONR, and we pivoted that whole scope over to PEO ships, which is the primary sponsor for the Zumwalt program at the time. Now today, in today's language, you'd call that an SBIR reachback. We didn't call them reachbacks back then. And how we did the work scope on that project is Raytheon was asked to do the top level requirements and design analysis using a classified tool that we had. And we did that as a subcontractor for the small business. The small business did the composite design, the fabrication, the details, and the tooling to take it to full production. And why it was successful really was the ship's design manager, Andy Summers, stayed directly involved with this whole thing and gave it visibility to the program technical and technical leaders, technical and management leadership. Captain Jim Searing back in those days. The result of that whole story is we were able to flip directly to a sole source production contract for all 3 ships. The first contract was only for 2 ships. And from the time that was an idea and just a gap and a need, and kind of a sketch on a napkin, to a full production award decision for 2 ships, it was only 3 years. And the result was the Navy avoided and saved over $15 million per ship. So that's one story. That's one specific story of one SBIR company. The second story is a multi-SBIR company story where there was, again, a new mission requirement that was flowing down for ship self-defense. And it was a whole mission thread with sensors, with software, with integration, and essentially with non-lethal and lethal weapons at the end. So it was a whole mission thread, sometimes known as a kill chain. In that particular new requirement, we proposed to the Navy to stitch together a whole family of SBIR companies, 3 actually. It was known as DICE, and that was a name that was conjured up by the small businesses actually. D was the detect, I was the ID, bad guy, good guy. C was the control part, the system in the middle, and E is the engage part. And it was a very unique approach, and the Navy PM, Captain Steering and his TD and all that, they really, really liked it, embraced it. And the neat story I'll tell about that one is that 2 of the companies, the detect and the ID companies, they actually shared engineers on their 2 separate SBIRs. So they had engineers from both companies who worked on each other's SBIR. Now, why is that useful? Well, what it did is it accelerated all the interfaces between what would otherwise be separate SBIR contracts and separate scope. And so, and of course, it increased collaboration amongst the teams. And one of the companies was in Maine, the other one was in Alabama. And so that was a real interesting story there, and that was a good result. The last story is about a current program that we're executing on for the Navy at Raytheon. It's called Barracuda. It's a mine neutralizing underwater vehicle, small vehicle. And the story there is that without all the large details of collaboration that went on with NAVSEA, is that there was a prototype UUV that we built at Raytheon on our IRAD money. And a lot of the sensing capabilities and connection capabilities and data interface capabilities were formed with SBIR companies. A whole batch of SBIR companies, and a real close partnership and dialogue with the leaders in the program that we were able to have and that brought it all forward. And the strong Navy collaboration and championing for a Navy RIF award. There were 2 Navy RIFs on that program. And one RIF was for the warhead itself, which a small company developed successfully. And then the other RIF was a RIF that allowed us to bring as an integrator a final concept demonstration for the operational concept right down at Newark at one of the Antex events. So the culmination of that was an Antex event. And to this day, we still partner and leverage SBIR on the program as it continues to execute going forward. There are multiple RIFs and SBIRs still going forward on the program. So there's lots of different ways you can do creative stuff. And Steve B suggested the other day to me that we lay this out as an example of different ways you could stitch path forward possibilities to collaborate. And I'm looking and seeking and hoping we can do that with the Tech Bridge as the vehicle.
Fantastic, Alf. Thank you. Thank you. We went a little bit over, so I want to be mindful that we've got 3 other speakers that have their stories as well, but thank you much. How about we jump to Eugene from Lockheed Martin?
Good afternoon. How's my audio?
Very good.
Okay, unfortunately I can't share video because I'm actually in the office today, but we do quite a bit of SBIR programs as well. I'll share 2 stories because I'll put too much time. So Cortec is a small business out of Pennsylvania. They had a novel power supply concept, and Lockheed decided to integrate that into the Mark 48 torpedo. So we are 5 years into their product development qualification, and that product actually has a form factor that fits well with VME-sized card cages. So we are looking at other opportunities now beyond the Mark 48 to put it into the JSF F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So at the time, Cortec won their phase 1. They were a very small company, really living project to project. And through the course of the years, with the phase 1, phase 2 option periods, we were able to champion a phase 2.5 with joint funding. And now that amount of funding has allowed Cortec to grow, hire new employees, and actually win quite a bit more work across Aspire programs and direct Newick contracts. So with their success, we were introduced to another company called Hnu Photonics. And this is an Aspire company out of Hawaii that has a unique anti-tamper, anti-theft tag that can be placed on electronics. We matched the two companies up, and now they have submitted a phase 2 with DLA, with both companies, for additional funding to place HNU's secure ID tag on the Cortec power supply. So it was a win-win all around, because DLA apparently has money to spend in 2020. They were looking for companies to team up and engage with. In the course of that discussion about the power supply electronics with Hnu, they made us aware of an opportunity they have to support a COVID-19 request to pivot one of their technologies to a ventilator system. So they were able to develop some prototype electronics to build 10 units, which were then shipped for approval with the FDA. And as you can imagine, there's not many electronics manufacturing companies on Hawaii. They then contacted Lockheed to ask for recommendations. What would a big company do in this situation? And having only built 10 ventilator electronics, and their customers were asking for 10,000. So we performed a design review for them on our nickel and made recommendations such that their set of electronics is now ready for manufacturing and production. So it started out with one small business that we worked with very closely. We're able to introduce them to a second company and turned into work for both of them. No work for Lockheed in that particular situation, but it then turned into a third project where now it looks like Lockheed is going to be building ventilator electronics for the small business in high volume. So you never know where these things can lead to, and you really have to make the connections and spend the time to learn these small companies, especially when a prime can be the matchmaker role. That's really invaluable to the small business. And if it comes with recommendations from different business areas within Lockheed, in that particular case, a recommendation came from aeronautics that was then passed to RMS. So yeah, it's invaluable in our business. Our local site here in Newport is small. We're less than 100 employees, but when you talk about the backbone of the Aspire corporate through Lockheed, there's thousands and thousands of engineers engaged with small business all around the country. So that's it, Lee.
Thank you, Eugene. I will add that Lockheed's a massive company, as are these others. But Eugene and his team, I know, have made it feel very personal and very collaborative when small companies have either reached out to them or them to small companies. And that is a skill set that is not easily found with very large companies, so that the small company doesn't feel like they're entering a bureaucracy field. They're entering with a partner, a valued partner, and as a valued partner. With that, how about we go to Dr. Amy Heintz from Battelle. And Amy, you've been with us since the first moment this opened up this morning, so thank you for your patience. You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been great. I really enjoyed the discussion. And just to give you a little bit of background, so I'm Amy Heintz. I'm a tech fellow at Battelle in material science. And Battelle is indeed a system integrator, but we are a nonprofit R&D organization. So we have about 2,500 scientists and engineers who work in distributed locations, but it really is a breadth of experience that is completely accessible by any of our partners. And I wanted to come back to kind of what I think is important here, which is that we're all here because we want to make an impact. And we're all here because we want to grow our businesses. We also want to have fun solving hard problems. So there's some commonality there. And I think one of the routes for doing that is innovating faster. You know, we see that, and that's what we're here to talk about. And, you know, what's really struck us during this COVID-19 crisis is how having common purpose really does make us go faster. So Battelle, in fact, we like many of us have seen the impacts of the supply chain, and we had a technology that we had some deep scientific foundational knowledge on, and figured out that we could deploy it to sterilize masks, to sanitize masks. And in a matter of a month, we had captured that deep science, put into an emergency use authorization, collected the small businesses and local companies to then help us field it so that we could be sanitizing thousands of masks a day. So it just went to show that when we really all put our minds together and got our networks together, we could really do something impactful. And so in the same way, I think this same community, as we hear about each other's needs, we can really do something impactful. So I'm going to tell a couple examples and stories. You know, Aaron Reed asked, what are the areas where we need technology? So I'll address that with one example, and then I want to come back to that as well. But so Battelle develops EO/IR systems for US SOCOM, and they depend on having novel technology. And what we do to really go faster is we take technology from other deployments, let's say unmanned aerial systems, and then we adapt those for the underwater environment. And so by doing that, we can go really fast. And so as an example, you know, we had a first prototype go from concept to operation in 14 months. So for those of you who have technologies out there, you know, and if it's an EO/IR system, we'd love to hear about it. Because we have an open platform where we have existing projects, existing customers, and we're looking for technology. I'd say in the same vein, we have some other internal campaigns that aren't related to maritime, but still I'll mention them. Space and hypersonics, so we're very interested in advanced manufacturing of composites, both for the Navy and AFRL. So we're really interested in new automation approaches, new 3D printing, and we have the ability to adapt those things. The other would be in microelectronics. And finally, we have a campaign in neurotech. We'd be interested in wearable sensors and functional materials. So I wanted to get that out there because Aaron had specifically asked, you know, what technologies are we looking for? And we are actively looking. So those are areas where the way you would partner is you'd come to us, we'd talk, and we have existing contracts or existing internal research programs that we could bring that on. So a next example was one where we have these EO sensors, and we wanted to figure out whether we could make it hydrophobic, so that as it transitioned, you know, salt wouldn't stick. So we found a coating actually looked really interesting, and we did some development work for the government and demonstrated proof of concept, and it looked good. But the really interesting part of the story is what happened next, which is that Battelle had a customer come in from the automotive sector, an automotive OEM. And they had a different problem, but the foundational material science question was the same. And we were able to show that that technology works for an automotive OEM. And so now we're in the process of figuring out how we can get that small business to scale up their technology for an automotive OEM. So it was development together on IRAD, which stands for Internal Research and Development, working with a government customer to mature it, and then taking that mature technology and knowledge base to an automotive OEM who has a huge opportunity. So that's another one. Last example is really the idea of repurposing technology more broadly. So because we're a nonprofit R&D, we often work together with our customers to develop and translate technology. So we had one customer who was developing a forward-looking sonar. It was an improved recon sonar system. The submersible we were putting it on was very noisy. So one choice would be, well, let's redesign the electronics. That would be a major undertaking for the small business and also could likely move them out of their secure position. But we came up with another approach. We said, well, why don't we design a material that can damp it? So we created a novel polymer, molded in a sleeve, and isolated the hydrophone. So it was a way of really bringing in a different kind of way of solving the problem. And because we have a large but small company, you know, with 2,500 people, we can access what's needed. And I guess in that same vein, you know, we often find that our customers, you know, maybe they have a university IP that they're trying to translate, and it doesn't work. You know, sometimes technology doesn't work. But we had a case where this is a different industry, but they were trying to develop a cancer diagnostic, and it didn't work the way they hoped it would. But by working together and through our knowledge of some of the other industries, we actually found another place for it. And so I think this is the value of this kind of network, is connecting together, learning each other's strengths and skills, and then figuring out how we can go fast and really make an impact.
Amy, thank you. Those were great stories, and I know you raced through that, but and there was a lot to take in. So I encourage all of you, if you'd like to, and I think you've done this with Venture Cafe, you've shared contact information that we've provided to you on these folks. But if you'd like to share it in the chat, that's fine. But thank you. Battelle does some really, really important work, and the fact that you're a nonprofit just adds a little bit different complexion to you as a prime contractor. So thank you very much. So
you're welcome.
Last but not least, we're going to get to Glen Franks, who's from BAE. Glen, please tell your stories.
Sure. Thanks, Lee. So Glen Franks, I work at BAE Systems. We're up in Burlington, Massachusetts. BAE Systems, again, larger prime. So ES, Electronic Solutions, has a R&D branch they call Fast Labs, and that's where I'm out of. And much like the other primes, we've worked in the past with many SBIRs and tried to reach out to small companies. And now we've actually really changed our innovation ecosystem quite a bit, in that we're being very intentional. We actually started what's called a tech scouting group, right? And in that tech scouting group, it required a few things. One, almost like a complete new restructure of how we do business with small companies, restructure on, our business model in terms of how we use small companies into our large capabilities and products. So with that, we've developed this tech scouting group, and now over the past 2 years, we've really started to engage. We've actually got something going on at the Cambridge Innovation Center right now. My boss, Francesca, in that case, is actually running that. It's C4ISR, the group up there. Our product line has got people up there and working away, so that's concurrently going on. So let me tell you a couple of like real hearty engagements that we've had in this new tech scouting paradigm, where we're going out and reaching out and finding companies. So in that, we're starting to co-sponsor some of the events that are going on, Mass Challenge, some of the CIC events that are going on. We actually have a presence up there at the CIC in an office. We're organizing networking events and those kinds of things. So another big one that I've been involved with is the Techstars, the Air Force Accelerator. So gone right in there, and it's really about the dual use. And what we're really trying to intentionally not do, a lot of times the big companies come along and they buy up the small companies and they integrate and they ruin their innovation. So we're really being intentional about not, messing with these smaller companies, letting them be innovative and creative and be able to move at the speed that we need to move at now. So we found a company called Smile ML, and they had a very interesting capability in that, especially in these times right now, who's paying attention on the Zoom, who's not? And their first thing was for remote classroom teaching and to making sure kids are engaged. They've also looked at it for the potential with sales and marketing when they do pitches over the network as well. So what is people's emotions like as this is going on? And, much like Amy was talking about in terms of you know, running sensors and those kinds of things. On the other end of these EOIR sensors, can we tell from the people that we're looking at what their emotions are? Are they a threat? Are they hostile? Are they friendly? And can we tell by their emotions? And what SmileML was doing was looking at micro movements to be able to tell that. So we actually looked at their dual use, looked at our military use, and did a small IRAD with them for, I think, somewhere between 50 and 100K to actually see how this would work in an actual scenario. Looked like we were able to categorize in those four different ways, and then very much the SOCOM folks are sort of thought leaders. We put together a collaboration with the folks at SmileML, and now we're working on a $3.5 million contract with them to do just that as part of a larger system that we're putting together. So in partnering with them, real nice success story of taking literally a 2-person company and getting them engaged. And now we're actually collaborating on SBRs and those kinds of things. So it's really about this intentional tech scouting effort, the sponsoring, the integrating, and pulling those out. And Lee, in the interest of time, I'll just leave it at that story, but say there's several others, and we're working on with another company right now called Peak Metrics. They're in the new cohort of Techstars, and they do sentiment analysis and some neat stuff there. But well, I'll let it go from there, Lee.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Alf, Eugene, Glenn, Amy, you've been very patient, but also you share some really great stories. And while we've rushed through many of these stories for in the essence of time, there is a lot loaded into these stories, a lot of work, a lot of passion, a lot of commitment goes behind making these connections and keeping these projects going to a point where they have a beginning, a middle, and a future, which is really exciting in our world. So with that, in the essence of time, we're a little bit into the next panel. So let me zip it at this point, but thank you so much.